Okay, well, let's just jump into this great topic. And I'm so excited today that we have three super smart and progressive MLS leaders. I'm sure many of you know them. They don't need any introduction, but we'll officially announce them later. But we've got Art Carter here, CEO of CRMLS, Jeff Bosch, and Merri Jo Cowen. Jeff's from IRES in Colorado, and Stellar is in Florida. So thanks everybody for being here today. I appreciate it. So I'm going to quickly just set the stage here about why did we think this was an important topic. I've gotten a lot of calls over the last several weeks, and frankly, some with a little bit of panic in their voice about what to do about all this craziness that's going on out there. And frankly, there's probably a little panic that's deserved from all of us at this point. But I thought when the going gets tough, the tough get going, and who better to ask than people that have already been through this and are actually thriving with these kinds of strategies. So before that, I want to just quickly introduce Wave Group. So some of you may not know us. Our job, we believe, is to be passionate about industry change, and not only change for change's sake, but most importantly, change to make sure that we have a long, viable, and profitable situation in our industry. And so sometimes the tough topics are the ones we really go after, because those are the ones that can really make the biggest difference. So that's kind of who we are as a company. Those that don't know, some of you guys know me only as the MLS, right? But we do a lot of things around the world in all different types of components. So we really believe having an integrated look at the real estate industry helps us think about these issues more holistically and in a way that truly will help our practitioners succeed and consumers really be happy with us and work with us for a long time. We have a broad team. It's not just Victor and I. Many of you know us, but we have, PR and marketing. We have business technology. We even have Web3. We have broker M&A. We have broker valuations and a whole bunch of other things. So again, we bring all of that thinking when we bring topics like this to the table to think about what are the implications for every component of the real estate industry. And so jumping in, this is really what got us thinking about this, I'm not going to go through all the settlements and lawsuits. I assume everyone on the call has heard about that more than they care to know about at this point. But the bottom line of it is, and even with the most recent settlement with Keller Williams, brokerages that represent 550,000 agents either cannot or will not require NAR membership or the three-way agreement anymore, right? So we look at these brands. These are obviously important customers for many of you, and we say, okay, what can we do to support them when they may need to make changes in their business? What is our job in supporting them when they need to make changes as well? So that's kind of our, why we're here today, is to say that's a big number. That doesn't include Berkshire Hathaway, which, as you probably heard, is going to the Supreme Court to fight this, which I love. And the millions of other, but not hundreds of thousands of other brokerages and millions of other agents that may or may not ultimately either adopt this philosophy or be required to adopt this philosophy. So that's why we're here today. This is not a theoretical exercise. There are people out there, hundreds of thousands of them today, that have to look at this seriously. Now, with that, I will say, just because they don't have to require it, it doesn't mean they're going to all walk away. Let's be clear about that, right? I don't believe most brokerages will say, I don't value NAR, I don't value what we do. I mean, maybe I'm Pollyanna about that, but I do believe that. But the truth is, some may, and if nothing else, we have to provide an opportunity if they say they don't want to do that, right? We don't want them to walk away from the industry or from organized real estate if they somehow believe that, requiring NAR membership is something that they don't want to be a part of any longer. So just to remind us, this is something that's not new. In fact, Stellar was one of the people named in, or what was at the time Mid-Florida, the Thompson decision, which was in Georgia, Florida, and Alabama, correct, Merri Jo?
Yep.
That was the outcome. And so back in 1994, so actually 30 years ago, coming up this mid-year, NAR made determined that each MLS may determine for itself whether non-members will be or will not be permitted to participate in the MLS. So this has always been, or at least for the last 30 years, has been a local decision. Some people tell me today, oh, NAR won't let me do that. Like, no, that's not true. Here it is in writing from what was actually talked about almost 30 years ago. So that's the first step of, recognizing. It doesn't mean you have to do it, but you can if you so choose. That's really the point of this ruling way back when, okay? And I thought this was interesting too. This is a study that recently was published by NAR, an association profile study. And their data says that 38% of associations now today do offer a non-realtor MLS subscription. And their statement or data suggests that it tends to be more larger groups than smaller groups that do this. But 38%, it's almost, you know, what, 4 in 10 of people are already doing this. So again, I've talked to some folks that are really worried. They think this is a brand new concept, that it can't work, that they're worried about a lot of things. And the truth is almost 40% of our industry is already doing it. And you'll see in these cases, Merri Jo, you've probably been at it since 1994 or sooner because of the Thompson ruling, right? So this is not something new. So that's why I thought it would be fun, not fun, but interesting to get together and let's have you guys ask questions of folks that are already doing it, that have done it for some time, and get those questions answered. So I've kind of put some of questions that I've heard from you, but again, feel free to jump in, you know, throw a question into the chat and we'll pose it to the group to make sure that you're getting everything you can from these 3 experts on the topic. Okay. All right. So I'm going to officially announce them. I think they all probably go without naming, of course, but you know, Art is CEO of California Regional, largest MLS in the country. Merri Jo is CEO of Stellar and largest in Florida, I believe, and one of the largest in the country, and the 3rd in the country. Yep. And then Jeff is CEO of IRES, which is a really interesting MLS. It actually builds its own technology. That could be a whole different webinar. So anyway, with that, I welcome you guys. Thank you so much for being here today. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Oh, thanks for having us.
Good to be here.
Yeah. Okay. So with that, I'm going to just turn this, let's just turn the screen off for a second. Let's just talk. It's easier that way. All right. So the first thing I want to do is just help people understand how each of your organizations work and how your business model works. You know, are you a wholesale retail? Do you sell it yourself? And specifically, how do you sell realtor subscriptions versus non-realtor subscriptions? So maybe we'll kick that off with you, Art.
Yeah, we're a little bit different of a model. You know, the Thompson case happened in 1994. California is regulated by what was called the Paulson case, and that occurred in 1983. So it has been a long road for MLSs in California under a requirement under the Ninth Circuit to allow for non-realtor membership. We are a wholesale model. I have 42 member associations that are part of CRMLS. And we basically charge a wholesale rate out to each one of our local associations. The billing and everything occurs at that level. And basically, we handle all of the aggregate stuff, such as setting of the rules and providing the technology and pieces along those lines. So a little bit different of a model, but one that has worked very successfully for us here in California.
That's great. Jeff, how does your model work?
Yeah, so we're an independent LLC that was seeded by Realtor Associations back in 1996, and we're direct bill, so we're direct seller. So for us, it doesn't matter whether they're a realtor or a non-realtor member. We ingest them the same way. You know, we do have a little difference in fee structure that we verify. We do a lot of verification through the realtor family, make sure the brokers are following NAR rules if they are NAR brokers, right? That everyone complies with that or has a waiver, but ultimately we deal with it direct. So really nobody in between us and the subscriber.
Gotcha. And Merri Jo?
Oh, Stellar MLS is, so we are shareholder owned by 19 realtor associations. We direct bill on an annual basis. Our we call them customers, our about 84,000 at this point customers. We, as you mentioned, Marilyn, have had non-realtor participants since that lawsuit was determined back in the day. And our all of our realtor member subscribers that come into Stellar come in through our shareholder associations, and non-realtor brokers come, which we refer to as Thompson brokers based on the case. Just like California has the Paulson, those brokers come in directly through Stellar.
Gotcha. So most of your realtor members or realtor customers, I like that. Your customers go through associations, but the non-realtor is sold directly from Stellar.
Right.
Gotcha.
And in CRMLS's case, both go through the local associations.
Okay, gotcha. And Jeff, you guys were not inspired by a lawsuit. You just did this, right? And a long time ago as well.
Well, so it's interesting because IRES was formed in 1996, and we actually made the change to allow both realtor and non-realtor members in 2000. So inspired is an interesting word because I actually didn't have any staff that was around back when that happened. I had to do a little bit of legwork to get back there. But ultimately, at that time, leadership saw some challenges based on some NAR dues changes and some independent brokers challenging for access in other areas of the state. And it was interesting timing because that actually coincides with when we started building our own system. So leadership at that time went and talked to all of our ownership, kind of got everybody together and said, hey, we can, go challenge this, or we can spend money building software. And that's kind of set our destiny on the direction we went. So got the buy-in from the group as a whole, and went that way. So we've been doing it since 2000.
Okay, gotcha. So none of you are new to this. This is not like happened 15 minutes ago. Okay, gotcha. So, here I want to throw out the things that I've heard as concerns. And again, I've got a great question we're going to ask you. Okay, Matt has a good question. This has come up before. Do you require a real estate license for MLS set membership or some kind of license?
We require real estate or appraisal licenses.
Okay, gotcha. Jeff?
Same.
Art?
Same for us.
Yeah, I think there is some misperception that if you're not a realtor, you can just be random Joe Blow off the street. That's not the case. They still have to be licensed real estate agents, sanctioned by the state, still taking the CE courses the state requires, et cetera, et cetera. Oh, and Matt said we have licensed home inspectors in North Carolina. I don't know if any of you have home inspectors as members or subscribers, but that's an interesting thought too. Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah, thank you for that, Matt, because that is one concern I think people hear sometimes is just be some random consumer can just join because they feel like it. That's not what we're talking about. So here's a big one we hear. We often hear that there are concerns about how MLSs with non-realtor subscribers drive home the principles of the Code of Ethics. Because people are not realtors, they don't have to officially subscribe to the Code of Ethics, right? So how do you guys handle that? That you don't want people that are unethical, obviously selling real estate. They have a license, so they have some requirement to be ethical, I hope. But how do you deal with the differential between those that know the Code of Ethics, have been trained on the Code of Ethics, and those that don't, but they're still selling together? Who wants to take that one?
Well, I can take that.
Okay.
For, as you pointed out earlier, Marilyn, NAR has opened the door for MLSs to decide whether or not they want to have non-realtor participants in their system. And some of us, like Art and I, have, it's mandated, but others have made the choice. I think when NAR did that, or along those lines, there are compatible rules that you can adopt as an MLS that are not exactly the Code of Ethics, but it's called a Code of Conduct, and has very similar requirements as far as doing business goes in that. So that's adopted as part of our rules and regulations.
And so do they have to sign sort of when the EULAs or the user agreements when they log in? Does the EULA have all of that baked into it? So you do sign off on it. Okay, Art, how does it work in your market?
Pretty much the same as Merri Jo. I will tell you that for those of you that are treading down this path, that you're going to get pushback from some in the realtor side of the equation that you're diluting the value of realtor membership. And that's not the intent. The intent is really to give people an even playing field when it comes to rules and everything that's going on from that standpoint. So we've just done as much as we possibly can because Merri Jo can probably give you a better idea of what her figures are. We don't know out in the wild how many of our members are actually realtors or not, because we don't track against that. But I think it's important that everybody, as much as you possibly can, has been put onto the same playing field that realtors have in the Code of Ethics. The EULA is a big part of that, and pushing forward some of those concepts and requirements on that side, and some changes to the rules and regs in regards to including some of those behaviors that are important to make sure that there is that level playing field.
So the rules and I mean, the truth is the rules and regs have some level of the code of ethics, at least philosophies baked in, even when you're not doing what you guys are talking about, right? I mean, they do coincide with one another, but so you don't have to worry about the code of ethics as long as you take the code of conduct concepts, which are the things that really matter when you're working with one another and with your clients successfully. Okay, got it. Jeff, do you do it any differently than that, or is that kind of how you handle it as well?
Similar, I think too, but and just to set the record straight, I'm a former board member and a realtor, and I don't want anything that I say to come out as like anti-association or anti-realtor, but I mean, they're really two different things, right? Like, and it gets really messy, and we've seen some challenges with some NAR rules where you're trying to get the MLS to kind of enforce parts of the code of ethics. And my personal belief is that, those are really two different things. So we do treat all of our subscribers, they all have to follow the rules. We've tried to have the rules baked in. We've tried to include some things from arbitration standpoint that, kind of push it in a direction that it's handled. But I mean, ultimately, it's not really an issue for us. MLS rules are MLS rules, and all subscribers have to abide by them, and we go from there.
So we're getting all kinds of questions. This is awesome. Thanks, guys. Keep them coming. So Joshua asks, forgive my ignorance, but do they separate the listing? Do you guys separate the listings in your MLS? Doesn't NAR prohibit the commingling of realtor and non-realtor listings? Let's clear that one up right now. Who wants to take that one? Jeff, go ahead. You take that one.
No, we don't separate them. And I would say, and not to pick on anybody, open a can of worms, like that does get weird with like RPR and other things like that, which is the one service that we can't offer to non-realtors. But we don't segregate our data feed. We may have in the past, but not since my tenure here. So, I mean, if you're part of the co-op, you're part of the co-op, and listings all flow equally.
Okay, Merri Jo, same thing in Florida?
Yeah, it's the same exact thing. And I think that the commingling rules that are mentioned there, first of all, that's optional, but also for us, it's based on whether they're a subscriber or participant in the MLS. And we provide equal services to realtors or non-realtors.
And,
Okay.
and commingling,
Yeah,
commingling is one of those things that NAR's rules in regards to that, as Merri Jo has said, are optional, and they're more concerned with the output from the MLS than they are from the actual presentation of data within the multiple listing service. So be very clear on that. And NAR does not have any prohibitions of commingling in between those two. So
yeah, it's really about the data. It's not about your status as a realtor or non-realtor. So thank you, Josh, for asking that question. And someone says, that sounds like the IDX display rule that says you can't display MLS listings commingled with FSBO listings. That's a different issue. I don't think we have any.
that was kind of what I was referring to. That's what NAR's rule about commingling is about.
Right, exactly. Okay. All right. So, when you have a challenge, or if you have a challenge, and Daniel, I'll get to your question because it's related to this in a second. Who handles it? Does it come through the MLS? Does it go to the local association? How does that happen if there is a challenge between the two?
Our local associations are involved in that, and we want them to be involved in that because we want to have local realtors responsible. My footprint is 600 miles tip to tip, and you don't have the ability to sit down with a local realtor. If you don't have that ability, it would be very problematic to feel like you're getting heard. So we have our local associations handle all of the hearings. We leave it up to our local associations whether they roll it through their regular professional standards process, or if they have a more educated email hearing process or in-person process. So we've provided best practices out to them and provided guidelines on how they can best service their members' needs in regards to those challenges. But we really feel that it needs to happen at the local association level.
Gotcha. How about in Florida, Merri Jo?
We take a different direction on that, in that we have a MLS hearing panel pool. So if it's a regulation that is specifically related to the MLS, we have our own hearing panels that are professional standards trained, although they're looking at the MLS rules specifically. And we gather those panel members from all of our shareholder associations. They all bring volunteers forward. So we handle the MLS related issues internally through our hearing panel process. It's a hugely complicated, but follows NAR's professional standards and all the due process, all of the pieces that are involved in that, but it's just focused on MLS. Now, if it's something that's more of an arbitration, then we have an arrangement with our association, our shareholder associations, to where we would pay them to take on an arbitration between members.
Gotcha.
A non-realtor, if there was such an issue.
So it's interesting to talk to you guys, and I hope for the people listening, is that there is no one way to skin this cat, right? There's a lot of different ways that you can approach this. And I think one of the things that I'm hearing a lot of is a lot of concern that somehow we'll do something that will violate NAR rules. And I think we go back to that 1994 rule that says you can do this if you so choose. You don't have to, there's no requirement to, but if you want to, you can, and you can find your own path as to how to do it without being in violation, because people are very worried about that, which is fair. I appreciate that. Jeff, how about you? Do you deal with it any differently, or how does yours get handled?
You know, I don't know if it's the altitude or what. You know, people play pretty nice up here. Maybe they're just out of breath and, you know, don't want to waste it on arguing with each other. But we definitely have pieces baked into the rules about arbitration. I would harken back, and this is a little bit different question or topic, but, you know, Merri Jo kind of led off with it, and I'm sure Art and I all kind of feel the same way, right? These are subscribers, and we try to treat them with as much, you know, customer service and treat them equally. I think one of the things that is important, though, it's kind of a parallel topic, is, you know, our staff has to know if it's if there's a legal question, because, you know, we're not lawyers. I'm the only licensee on staff, actually not even licensed in the state, but, you know, where do they go to for help? You know, we try to get them to the associations if it's code of ethics type issue, or maybe to the legal hotline for the state if it's an issue with that. If they're a non-realtor, we send them to DORA, or the Division of Regulatory Affairs for the state. You know, we have to, staff has to know the difference there, right, to be able to get them to the right regulatory body to help them.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, interesting. Here's another one I hear a lot about, and there's a few questions I'm going to get to, you guys, promise. I'm not going to ignore you, but how does it work with lockboxes? And I kind of go back to the DOJ almost settlement we had a few years ago, where, if you remember, they said that any licensee was going to need to get access to those lockboxes. Have you guys subscribed to that, or how does it work with lockboxes? Is there any difference in terms of realtor versus non-realtor for access?
So for us, Stellar MLS does not do lockboxes. We don't provide that service at all. Each of our individual shareholder associations offers lockboxes. I know we had some serious conversations when that was a proposed rule change coming forward, and I would suspect that that'll be something that comes forward in the future. And I know at least one or two of my shareholder associations have already adopted changes within to allow for non-realtor licensees to access the lockboxes so that they can keep the marketplace going in their area.
Gotcha. But they're doing it at the local association.
Yeah, we don't play any role in lockboxes at all.
And how about you, Jeff? Do you play a role in lockboxes?
I envy Merri Jo, because we do lockboxes on a regional basis, and again, it's a subscriber service. So it's interesting that our member owners, our association owners, do help us facilitate the distribution of those to our realtor members. In fact, even one of them helps facilitate the non-realtor members. I probably like a recruiting type thing for them, but ultimately, you know, for us, it's more just a matter of how to get it to them, the vehicle of it, but we don't care. We're agnostic. If you're a subscriber, you have lockbox access. Gotcha.
And do you get any pressure? This is a little off script, sorry guys, but do you get any pressure from either side, realtors or non-realtors, on trying to get more lockbox reciprocity around your state or region? Are you seeing more pressure on that, Art?
Yeah, so at the CRMLS level, we negotiate the master contracts and turn the administration back over to the local associations.
Mhm.
There is always a high level of angst in between the Supra faction and the Central Lock faction within our providers. We do allow for local discretion in the lockboxes they use.
Mhm.
But we're always very sensitive to making sure that people have access to not making Lockbox a new level of restriction of access to properties. So, we've adopted both what Supra has done and Central Lock has done to allow for, one-time access into properties for people who may not be, key holders. But, as Jeff said, it's a subscriber-based business, and we are not discriminatory in between realtor and non-realtor card or key holders.
So Sharon has a question. She said, I keep hearing from the panel that they refer it back to the local associations. What about those that do not belong to an association? Well, I think you're saying that even if you don't belong, there's still association responsibilities. Is that fair?
Yeah, well, what we've done, again, we handle the MLS rules and regs violations internally for all of our customers, whether they're realtors or not. If we run into an arbitration type case, then we would hire one of our shareholder associations to arbitrate between the non-realtor and the realtor, because the arbitration is a key part. But other than that, as far as code of ethics, then that, we don't get involved in that from our end.
Yeah, so yeah, go ahead.
So just to fill in some flavor on that side, the reason why we push it back to our local associations is because non-realtor MLS subscribers, we don't call them Paulson brokers, we call them MLOs. MLOs have to come through a local association, so they have a relationship and bill paying relationship with that local association. And another big reason why we want some of that being done at the local association level is there is differences in between the fining amounts that could be done under an AR policy for MLS and under an AR policy for code of ethics. And so, it does put another, quiver in the arrow of the hearing group in regards to, truly hearing and applying all of the pressures they can.
Gotcha. That makes sense. So Roger Chapman has an interesting question. He said, how would data sharing be handled with associations that have not adopted a non-realtor membership? So if you've got someone, but they want data access in another market that has not adopted it. Have you had that situation? And if so, how have you handled that? Anybody had that problem? Jeff's smiling. Have you thought about
I'm just smiling because I think it's, this even goes back to what Art was talking about with lockboxes, with different lockbox things. Anytime you've got an overlap, right, you've got some challenge with the market, right? So maybe there's a tradition where, one handles a showing service and another one, maybe the brokers handle it, or lockboxes could be an association solution and it could be an MLS solution in another market. Unfortunately, I think that the allowance of non-realtors also can cause the same amount of chaos or churn, right? And if you are bordering a market that is staunchly opposed to opening up, I do think it will cause you problems with data share, because there's some concern about control. And I think ultimately, right, that's maybe where I feel, again, my personal beliefs only, that all of this is going right. You can't build walls around things, and I think we all kind of operate that way, but ultimately you will have different philosophies and that could cause you a challenge with data share.
Yeah, I 100% agree with your philosophy about not building walled gardens. Like, if there's anything we should be learning from these lawsuits, is do not do anything that somehow shuts off access or accountability or transparency to a consumer. And you could argue that might, right? No, you can't. If you're a non-realtor, you can't come into this market because you're a non-realtor. That someone could argue that's somehow restrictive. So I'm totally with you on that. Art, did you have a comment on that too?
Well, it's gone through the court system in some major districts in the United States, circuits, and And it has been very clear that that's been the final decision. So there is precedent out there for people to fall back on.
So you guys, I know, Jeff, I'm not sure about you, but I know Stellar and CRMLS, I believe, you data share outside of your states, right? You like, don't you have something with FMLS, for example, Merri Jo?
Yeah, we do data share with FMLS, and we also data share with Mobile, Alabama. But all three of us are in the same court system where we all have to allow non-realtor membership. So it hasn't really been an issue. If we do engage in others outside of our state, that would just be something that we would make the other party aware of. And if they didn't, we would not exclude our non-realtor listings. They would take all or nothing, basically.
Gotcha. And do you have any situations where you're outside of Paulson's, range in your data sharing?
Outside of Paulson and Thompson's range, yeah, with Bright, but there's not an issue with that whatsoever. Like Merri Jo said, we would never, I don't know who's a realtor and who's not a realtor in my database. We're that agnostic. So I wouldn't be able to call those listings out if somebody wanted to anyways.
Gotcha. Okay.
Just wouldn't do it.
So let me ask a reality question. I'm hearing from some of my association executive friends that they're getting calls, especially from some of their larger brokers, which make them nervous about, well, tell me why I should be an NAR member now. And by the way, and you guys have probably heard this too, people don't know that the three-way agreement is a thing. They think you can drop NAR membership and not the other two, but that's a whole other conversation. But with that, are you seeing any uptick, and you probably can't tell because of the way you're structured, but are you seeing any uptick in even interest in talking about non-realtor subscriptions, or is it kind of where it's always been in your markets?
Well, in our market, we have a very small percentage of the non-realtor brokers, what we call, again, we refer to them as our Thompson brokers. Most of them are small firms or single brokerage firms. And we actually today have less than we had a year ago. So we have not seen any rush and rumble to come towards us. I think there's a couple of things that we have to take into consideration, because that's how it is right now today. A lot of the lawsuits are with all of the requirements and the settlements that you can't make your brokers be realtors. None of that's finalized yet. I mean, all of those settlements are still in the court. So perhaps that may change in the future. Mm-hmm. But I think it comes right back to what you were saying, Marilyn, is like realtor associations offer huge value. And I think that just like as an MLS, because we're a regional MLS, we know that we offer significant value to our subscribers, to our brokers and our agents. And associations offer a huge amount of value. And what it's going to come down to, if that intersection happens and a broker comes in and says, why should I be a realtor when I could just go be part of the MLS? Mm-hmm. That's the time to sell your value.
Right.
And I think you have to be ready for that, and really understand what you provide as value, and then articulate that back to your brokers, because we're not putting out a flag saying, hey, leave the realtor association. We're owned by realtor associations. We support realtor associations and all of the values and everything that comes with that. But we as an MLS cannot be the ones that articulate to a potential Thompson broker or a non-realtor broker with the value of why they should be part of an association. And I think that is probably the biggest place that associations, they know their value, but let's start articulating it just like we are as MLS is articulating our value to the brokers and thereby the consumers. So I think everybody should be ready for that conversation. And I think
they will be very clear.
Yeah,
to be very clear, none of us are political organizations.
Yeah, exactly.
And it just seems so anti-intuitive to me to be faced with situations where the political might of NAR and the local associations and the state associations really should be being brought to bear on some of these issues, and you're contemplating leaving them. You can't complain about the lawsuits. You can't complain about the regulatory pressures from the Department of Justice and the FTC. At the same time, you're, basically cutting the legs out from underneath the organizations in which could have that influence for you. MLSs have historically never been political, with few exceptions, but for the most part, I think there's a lot of rumbling and probably not a whole lot of movement that long-term will occur, because there is a value at the local association for a number of different reasons, and political being, not the least of them.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a couple of brokers that are getting sued in Florida, unfortunately, and you're in your region, Merri Jo.
Yes.
And they, same thing. They question, well, what do I need the Realtor Association for? Until they got sued. And then the Florida Realtors attorneys and their attorneys are, they're working together. They're figuring out this whole program. It's like, talk about a value proposition. Like when my literally existence is being threatened, my association comes to my rescue. And of course, nobody can guarantee a winner. I mean, that's a whole different conversation, right? But the idea that they're there to support you, try to help you, educate you, because frankly, most attorneys are not antitrust experts. It's like a special thing, and they're some of the most expensive attorneys in the country, right? So they saw a value, and they we questioned it until we got the call from Florida Realtors. We're like, we are totally in. We're never leaving. These guys are doing exactly what they need to do for us. So yeah, it's really just, to provide people flexibility if for whatever reason they choose. And here's one this is not something I don't think a broker can do today, but I'm getting this question too. So what if I'm a broker, I'm a realtor as the broker. I believe in the family. I believe in advocacy, all the things we just said, but I have a top producing agent. We all know everybody wants to hold on to those top producing agents, and that top producing agent doesn't want to be a realtor anymore. What can I do? What can a broker do at this point, or can they do anything, or should they be able to do anything? Who else to take that one?
I think that depends on your state, right? And your licensing rules and different things like that. But I mean, potentially you could have a realtor and a non-realtor brokerage, depending on the allowances, things like that. But, that's a choice.
Yeah, I think that's pretty well outlined in the three-way agreement through NAR. If you're a broker and you're a realtor, that your agents have to be realtors, or they can register with the local association as a non-realtor. And if somebody wants to totally avoid even that, then I just don't think there's any accommodation right now for being able to say that the broker can be a realtor, but this agent could go be completely disassociated with the association. And, but I think that all comes back to the three-way agreement, and the way that it's designed is to make sure that a broker doesn't join and then have 50 agents that don't join, but still get all of, get the realtor type benefits. But that's all allowed for in that three-way agreement. The complete separation of, like, I want to be a realtor as the broker and Art doesn't want to be, that there's really no fix for that right now that I've seen.
Art, any thoughts on that?
I don't have a dog in that fight. So given the fact that I'm focused on, MLS access and not, how a broker deals locally with their realtor organization, I agree with Merri Jo, having lived in that world before. There really isn't. I've seen brokers try to do that, and it doesn't fly very well. So it's just not something that we have to deal with.
Gotcha. Okay. Here's one that is one that came up when we were prepping for this, I think is interesting too. So one of the things that I hear associations talking about, back to your point about value proposition, Merri Jo, is they lean on the statewide forms or form solutions as one of the key reasons. And many times it works because those are great forms and great solutions. But let's just walk around the table. We'll start with you, Jeff. Does your state offer statewide forms? And do you think that does help people stay in the realtor family?
Yeah, they offer statewide forms. So as long as you're a licensee, you have access to them. There's multiple different forms providers. We're one of them, but there's others. So as long as you are a licensee, you have access to the forms. It's just the vehicle that you choose to get them.
But you can still get them as a non-realtor.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a division of real estate. It's a Colorado state thing. It's not the association.
Got it. So it's offered from the DRE. Okay, gotcha. And how about art in California? How does that work?
Yeah, there are statewide forms. They are offered through our state association.
Mhm.
You do have access as a non-realtor to those forms. You do pay a subscription fee for that,
Okay.
which the forms are included in realtor membership in California.
Okay, so you get them, but you have to pay extra if you're a non-realtor. Okay, and how about in Florida, Stellar? Mary?
In Florida, the forms are provided through Florida Realtors, and they are limited to realtor-only access. And they may have a subscription available for non-realtors. To be honest, I'm not aware of that because we're not in the forms business. We offer multiple platforms that have access to the forms.
Mhm.
And I think depends on the license that the vendor got from Florida Realtors, whether it's limited to realtors only, or maybe it's an unlimited license.
Gotcha. So we have several questions about,
Marilyn,
oh yes, go ahead, Jeff.
before we go past that, just real quick, I mean, it was kind of like worked in, but nobody's used the word advocacy, right? I mean, realtor associations are great advocacy bodies, and even though in our case the state does produce the forms, the associations are involved in that, right? They give input on that. I mean, ultimately it's up to the state, but again, that's another way that the association influences real estate. It's just that they don't control the forms in our case, right? It's a statewide form.
Gotcha. We got a couple of other questions I'll throw at you guys. One from Joe Rogers about how does it work with insurance? So if you have a non-realtor member in an association that's distributing your content, how does it work? Can they get NAR insurance if they have non-realtor members as well? Or can you get NAR insurance, or how does the insurance work, I guess? Just generic.
Interestingly enough, on that very first slide that you showed, Marilyn, with the NAR's opinion, it said right down there in the fine print that the MLS would still, or the association would still qualify for the insurance.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, good.
I only know that because I saw it on the slide.
Yeah. So good. We're educating ourselves. I love that.
Plus, we have non-realtor members, and we've always been covered by NAR, so I don't think that's an issue.
Okay, gotcha. Anything that you've seen in terms of differences with insurance?
No, I will
Oh, come
pass
on.
on that one.
Oh, come on.
If you've been sued for antitrust, you're not going to get antitrust insurance ever again. So be prepared for that.
Yeah, that's a whole other, we could probably do a whole other webinar on where to get insurance these days. A lot of people are struggling. Even if you've had it, people don't want to renew because obviously there's significant activity. Okay, so now there's a lot of questions around, and I'm not going to ask you specific pricing, or because obviously speaking of antitrust, we're not going to talk about that, but there's several questions about, is the pricing model and the scope of services different for a non-realtor versus a realtor? Who wants to take
I can go with that. No, to us, everybody, once you're a subscriber and a participant, you have everything, and there's no price differential in that fee that we charge for MLS services. We do have throughout our whole system a fee for the local service centers. So Stellar does charge a fee to service the non-realtors because they don't go through our associations.
Right.
But what they pay as a base is the same thing everybody else pays. They get everything we have, all data feeds, anything. They are our participant and our subscribers, and we do not limit their access in any way.
And just to be clear, if you're a realtor and you buy from one of your association shareholders, you're also paying a service center fee.
Yeah. In our market, that's how it works, because so much of our business is done on our behalf, kind of, so to speak, at our local association. So they can assess a service center fee to their realtors based on what they provide, but we charge a fee to our non-realtors because we provide the services direct.
But the local associations determine what their own,
Absolutely.
that their fee is. You have
And they're
nothing.
all different, and there's no set fee. They all
Gotcha.
choose, but they sit back and evaluate what they provide. I mean, there are our port of entry, so to speak, for new members, member changes, all of the membership pieces that feed to us. They host our trainers and our classes and provide, other services on our behalf. And so they choose whatever fee they want to charge.
Gotcha. Okay. How about in your markets? Art? Is there any difference?
Yeah, no difference on our side. As I said, we don't even track realtor versus non-realtor membership. So, you're serviced the same way, no matter what.
Gotcha. Jeff?
I'm going to be the odd duck out here. We do have a difference in that, but I would say that maybe similar to the servicing fee Merri Jo was talking about. Our ownership a lot of times is providing the training place, and a lot of things that are ancillary to that. And our non-realtor subscribers can also come and do CE at those locations. So that's kind of baked into that model a little bit.
Okay.
But if you're contemplating that, I would encourage a conversation with your attorney and what the value add is and what the logic is for that avenue.
Okay, gotcha. Monica asked a question. I think we've answered this, but let me just be clear. Her question is, how do you handle arbitration between two non-realtors? I'm sorry, I didn't realize that. Do they sign an agreement to arbitrate when they first join your MLS? So if it's non-realtor to non-realtor, do they still go through the associations?
For us, they do, and arbitration is in our ULIS as well as in our rules. So.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, and a lot of that, recognize that there's another layer of protection that these people are using, especially when we have a statewide form. The forms will dictate that, arbitration, they will agree to arbitration as part of the transaction. And then it just rolls back to whatever association they're paying their dues through.
Okay, got it. So a kind of a build on that question. One of the perceptions or fears I think that's out there is that without having the code of ethics, we've talked about how you build the code of conduct, which is in effect the similar kinds of components as it relates to the MLS. But do you see, like, I think and I'm just going to say it, there's a perception that somehow non-realtors are not as professional or as focused or as, is just as good basically as realtors. Do you see that? Do you see lots of challenges with your non-realtors relative to realtors?
None. We've seen nothing.
Nothing. Okay. How about you, Jeff?
I don't really see a difference in any of those kind of challenges, no.
Okay. And Art?
No, I think the worst thing that I could have done for myself was actually look at compliance cases on a regular basis, because it's across the board, and it's across the board. I'll kind of leave it at that.
Yeah, it's not like realtors are perfect. Let's be honest. None of us are perfect. We all make mistakes, right? But you're not seeing any more mistakes or any more issues with non-realtors than you are realtors. Okay. Because I think that's a perception too out there.
Well, and we don't track it that way, right? It's either a subscriber breaking a rule or a subscriber breaking a rule, right? So I mean, I don't even collect that.
Yeah. Yeah, I once they become part of the family, you guys kind of treat it agnostically as you're a subscriber or you're a customer. We're going to do everything we do to help you just as much as we help anyone else. Is that a fair?
Yeah, the rules are the same for everyone. I think where I was going specifically with nothing is with our the article that we have in our rules for the code of conduct. We've never had anyone file a complaint under that part of the rules and had to have a hearing about it. So
Never. With 84,000 subscribers, you've never had a problem.
No, well, understand that our non-realtor percentage is probably less than 0.5% out of that totally.
Right. But still, there's still a lot of listings being sold in your market, and no problem.
Absolutely.
That's great. That's good to hear. So, I think the reason I really wanted to do this today is because I know I've worked with many of these markets that already have non-realtor subscriptions, and I've seen that it is pretty much a non-issue. But it's like anything, it's the fear of the unknown. It's like, well, will that change everything? And, thank you guys for sharing today that it really doesn't change. Yes, you have to make some adjustments. Yes, you have to figure out how you're gonna sell it, who's gonna sell it, what price you're gonna sell it, what's gonna be included in the subscription and things like that, but it's not world ending. This is kind of what I'm hearing from you guys, which is, I think, encouraging. And Michelle McCaskill asked a question. I think I know the answer, but I'd love to hear your perspective. She said, would an arbitration issue become voluntary if a non-realtor and a realtor were in, like, can the non-realtor say, I'm not going to play nice because I'm not a realtor?
Because of the forms in California, they've agreed to it. So, you know, as part of the transaction, they've agreed to arbitrate primarily rather than go to the court system.
Okay, gotcha. So it doesn't matter what you're a licensee and you've got an issue, you're going to still have to deal with that. Is that the same in your case, Jeff and Merri Jo?
I think so. Yeah, I'm pretty sure so. It's just that, and for us, we wouldn't do the arbitration. We would ask one of our shareholder associations to do the arbitration.
Right. Okay, gotcha. Okay, good. Well, there's been some great questions here. If anybody has any more, throw them in the text or in the chat or Q&A. But I'm just, as a closeout on this, I'd love to just ask each of you, you know, if you, again, it's been a while, so you kind of have to dig deep probably on this, but if you were, you know, giving people advice, if someone comes to you and says, hey, I'm thinking about this, you know, what's your advice to them about, not even should they do it, but how should they do it if they so choose? But Merri Jo, you want to start us off on that?
Well, I think probably I would say consider it very seriously. I think that this is something that's going to come out in the over time. And then I would just say exactly pretty much what you just said. You know, there's lots of things to think about. Of course, we're always happy to share with how we do things or how things have been done. But you said earlier, like there's no right or wrong way. But I think if somebody was to ask me if it's a good idea, I would say yes. And here's some things that you want to be careful of, or things to watch out for, or things to think of.
We just got another question. I'll throw this in before we close out. Any thoughts on non-realtors serving on your MLS board of directors? Does that impact you? Go ahead, Jeff.
I can take that. You know, a lot of that depends on your ownership structure, and maybe to follow up your original question, a lot of the things we heard today, and I think they're right-minded, right? People are thinking about a lot of questions were about arbitration and things like that. I mean, ultimately, I think it's important to have your structure and your leadership and your governance separate of the association, right? It's a different business. In that case, as an LLC, you know, our operating agreement does stipulate that our board of managers come from our ownership associations, but it's their duty, right, to govern and treat them, you know, realtor or non-realtor member. And unlike Merri Jo, we have seen an increase in our non-realtor member over the year. But I mean, ultimately, that's a discussion in the boardroom, right? They're there to govern the MLS. And I think that's just, you got to put a lot of thought in that up front. That was done before I took the reins, so I didn't have to tackle that. But, you know, that's a shift a little bit in some markets.
So there's no requirement. In your case, there is a requirement because the shareholder structured it that way, but there's no NAR requirement or legal requirement. If you decided you wanted non-realtors, you could. It's just the way yours is structured at the moment. Is that a fair statement? Okay. And Art, how about you? Do you have non-realtors?
We do. But that, like Jeff said, that's got to be a local shareholder, you know, decision. To kind of, you know, cap things off from my standpoint, you know, it's really three things you need to look at the MLS level. You need to look at your rules and regs, of course. You need to look at the forms in which your members are using out in the marketplace. And then the final piece is you need to look at your EULA. And you need to recognize what holes might come about in regards to people moving from a realtor status to a non-realtor status, and make sure that you can basically handle any behaviors that were handled underneath a realtor structure and a non-realtor structure through those three mechanisms.
Gotcha.
Absolutely.
Jeff, any other final suggestions for you in terms of if you're thinking about this?
You know, I just, again, I think it comes back to, you know, loving them all, right? Treating them as customers and working through. I mean, the market kind of takes care of itself. You know, we stay in the MLS lane. Our associations are awesome. They have had great numbers. You know, in some areas, you have to be a member of the association to get forms or MLS or lockboxes, right? We've not been that way since 2000, and our associations have held strong numbers because they have a good value prop. So Do we have a mutually beneficial arrangement? Sure, we do, right? We operate better in the sandbox together, but ultimately they're separate businesses and seem to work well that way.
Well, I'm also hearing from you guys that there was no big financial hit that the companies took by offering, like, I think that's another concern sometimes is if we offer non-realtors, all our realtor membership's going to go down and we're going to lose money. I'm not hearing that from any of you guys.
I think that again depends on the value prop, right? NAR and whatever, you know, that they're selling that proposition. So that's a different sale.
So a couple more questions. Are there any additional rules, policies, or procedures that associations easy for me to say, should consider as they venture into accepting non-realtor members? Anything specific come to mind on that?
So hard to say because we're not privy to what your individual rules and regs say, what your individual EULAs say, what the forms in your marketplace say. So, you know, those are really, you've got to do some of that self-study yourself and see where the differences are.
And I think following up on that is like some of the things that we've already talked about that to pay attention to if you're going to go into this. How will you deal with arbitrations? How are you going to deal with violations of the rules and regulations? To Art's point, what's in your EULA? All of those things are things that you have to take a look at if you're going to put this together and find what works best in your market.
Yeah, exactly. And Adam, one final question. He said, do you maintain a mandatory submission MLS service area?
We do.
Yeah, we do.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. All right. Well, thanks everybody that asked all those terrific questions. And thank you guys for being so forthcoming with your time to really help people understand this. I know that it is a scary topic for many. I'm going to just throw this up here. If any of you guys want to, talk to us about this, we don't have all the answers. Nobody does, but we're trying to collect them from the smart people like the people we're talking to today. We're happy to help you with that. We do operate in markets that are, that do have non-realtor subscriptions, so we can give you some of that. And if you want to just stay current on this, just, take this QR code and join our newsletter, because we talk about these kinds of things all the time to just try to help us all figure out the best way to become and stay exciting, viable organizations for the long haul. And I can't underline enough, I think what everybody has said today is that in times like this, we all have to really dig deep and really think about our individual value propositions and drive those home. I wouldn't wait until we get a official documentation that says whatever it's going to say, whether it be from the DOJ, from these lawsuits. Like, you have a great association, you have a great MLS. It's time to start telling that story, if you're not already doing that, to anybody who will listen, to your subscribers, to your consumers, anybody that will take the time, the media, anybody that you can talk to. It certainly doesn't hurt. So, all right, well, thank you guys so much. This is being recorded, so for those that want it, we're going to send it out to all of you. Anybody that registered will get it. And again, if you have any other questions, just reach out to me at Marilyn at Wave Group, and we're happy to help.